Hello everyone, welcome back once again on Oracle SQL Developer. On this episode, we are going to look at privileges, but not into details because we are not working with Oracle Administration Workshop 1. But we will look at the definition of privileges and then roles, how to display privileges, how to display rules, why do we need a privilege, and then why do we need a rule, the difference between the privilege and then the rule, and then how to grant privileges or pass on privileges to users, and how to create a user. So we'll look at the types of users as well. So let's begin. Let's open our Oracle interface again, which is the CMD. This is actually a command prompt interface you're seeing, this black interface. That is the interface we'll be working with for our Oracle database. As I stated in the previous video, I mentioned Oracle SQL Developer, but for now we are not going to use the Oracle Developer. I will teach it in the next episode, but for now we are focusing on the black interface, that is the command prompt for Oracle database. So after displaying the current user, which is show user is anonymous, let's look at what we call privileges and then the role. When we say privileges, privilege in Oracle database, they are rights assigned to a user to perform a specific task. Whenever you create a user, the user will just be there as a whole. The user will not be able to make connections. The user will not be able to create a table, to insert records on its own, unless you grant what we call privileges or roles to the user. So before you can display the privileges, all the privileges we have in Oracle database, you should be in the sys user. You can also display privileges for a specific user, but for now we want to see all the privileges that we have in Oracle database. So we now know that we are in the anonymous user. So let's switch back to the sys user. So I'm connecting to sys, so connect sys as sys DBA. So connect the system as the system database administrator. So I'll hit on enter. As I indicated in the previous video, that the sys has what we call the operating system authentication. It does not need a password to make connections. So I'll hit on enter to make connection, and then I'm in the sys account. So if I should execute show user, I have here user is sys, so I'm in the sys user. We want to see all the privileges. How do we display privileges? So this is the command that we use. Select asterisk. In database, whenever you see asterisk means all. We want to see everything. So select all from session underscore privs. This is a view which will help you to display all the privileges you have in the database. So select, let's execute the command, select asterisk from session underscore privs. I'll bring my semicolon because that is the end of the command, and then I'll hit on enter. So these are all privileges that we have in Oracle database. 252 privileges in Oracle database. So these are all privileges we are seeing inside this black interface. So you execute the command, select asterisk or star from session underscore privs, and then it will give you all these privileges, which is 252 privileges in the Oracle database. So as stated here, 252 rows selected. So Oracle is having 252 privileges in the system. So after looking at the privileges, we are not going to go much into details with privileges, because everything I will teach everything in Oracle Administration Workshop 1, that is in administration. But for now, we just want to see the privileges we have and then how to pass on some vital privileges to users. So after looking at all the privileges, the next thing that we want to look at is what we term as a role. We say a role is a collection of privileges. A role is a collection of privileges. So the role is just like a container, but this container will hold a group of privileges. So this role will be, when you just create the container, it will be able to hold a privilege like select any table, create any table, insert any table. So it is just a container which will hold a collection or a group of privileges, while the privilege itself is what rights that we assign to a user for the user to perform a specific task. So example of a role is connect, DBA, and then resource. Connect, DBA, and then resource. So how do we display a role? So we are still inside the sys account or the sys user. So how to display roles? This is the command: select role from DBA underscore roles. We want to see all the rows in the database. So select row from DBA underscore rows. So in my black interface command prompt, I will type the command select row from DBA underscore rows. Take note that the select is for retrieving data from a source, a specific source. So select row from DBA underscore rows, and then I'll hit on enter. So this is also a whole lot of rows that we have in Oracle database. So these are all rows that we have in the database. So this is the first three examples that I stated in the notes: connect, resource, and then DBA. These are all rows that we have in the database. Okay, so after seeing the difference between the privilege and then the role, how do we pass on a privilege? How do we pass on the privilege to a user? So we have a privilege that we call create session. Create session. Let's look at the create session privilege. We have a privilege that we call create session. Create session. The job of the create session is to help a user to make connection. So when you create a user in Oracle database, the user will not be able to make connection. It will just be there. If you try to connect, it's not going to be possible. So we have a create session. That is the privilege there. So the user will not be able to make any connection unless you grant create session to the user. So the create session will only allow the user to connect. The user will not be able to create a table, will not be able to insert any record, but just to make connection. That is what we call what? Create session. Okay, so we have a command, we have a user that we call anonymous. Now we want to pass on the create session privilege to the anonymous user. To pass on the privilege in database, whether being it SQL Server or Oracle, we use the command grant, which is a DCL command, data control language. So we have grant, with grant, and then revoke. So grant here means to pass on the privilege. Revoke means you are taking back a privilege that you've already granted to a user. So grant create session to the user. So I want to pass on create session. So inside the black interface, grant create session to anonymous, and then I'll bring my semicolon. So grant the privilege create session to who? Anonymous. Anonymous is the user, create session is the privilege. So I'll hit on enter. Once I hit on enter, it will tell me grant succeeded. So we've successfully passed on a privilege that we call create session to the anonymous user. Okay, so after passing on the create session privilege, we are going to connect back to the anonymous user. So we know how to make connections. We just type con or connect, the username, which is anonymous, bring your /, and then 123 is the password. I'll hit on enter, and anonymous is connected. So after connecting to the anonymous user, how do we therefore display tables in the user? So let's say I'm inside the user, which is anonymous user, and then anonymous is having a whole lot of tables in the user. How do you access it? How do we display tables in a specific user? So we use the command select table underscore name. That is the attribute that we are retrieving from. So we want to see the table name. So select table underscore name from user underscore tables. Then I'll bring my semicolon. I'll hit on enter. So you can see clearly here, no rows selected. That means anonymous is not having any table inside there, right? So this is the command that we use in displaying tables in a specific user. Now if you are not interested in the first command, you can also use the second command, which is select star from tab. Right, this command select star from tab, this will display both tables and views in the database or in the user. So select star from tab, same, anonymous user is not having any view or table in there. Okay, so that is how we grant privileges, how we display tables in a specific user as well. Okay, so let's continue. Now we know that we have, working with Oracle users, we know that we have two types of users. We have a common user and then a local user, as I explained in the previous episodes. So we have two types of users in Oracle 12c, a common user and then a local user. We will be starting with the common user first. So in Oracle database, we have what we call a container, a pluggable database container. Now, how do we display pluggable database containers, or the containers that we have in the Oracle database? Before then, let's connect back to sys. So connect sys as sysdba show user, and then the user will tell me I'm in sys. So show user is sys, I'm now in sys. So how do we check the current container? So show con underscore name, I'll bring my semicolon and then hit on enter, and then to tell me the current container is $root. Don't forget that in the beginning I mentioned $root as the default container for all common users. So whenever you connect to Oracle database, the first container you are going to see is $root. That's the default container for all common users. So after looking at the current database container, how do we display all containers? How do we display all containers in the database? So to display all containers, we use the command select name from pdbs, right? It should be $v$ $pdbs. So select name from $pdbs. So I will execute v $ pdbs, and then I have here pdb $seed and then orcl pdb. So these are pluggable databases that we have in the Oracle 12c database. These are default databases. Okay, now after looking at the containers, and then we know we have two types of users, as I explained in the previous episode, a common user and then a local user. How do we create a user? We are now going to start with creating a common user. So we are going to create a common user. So creating a common user, that is the first thing we are going to look at. Now, before you can create a user, you should be in sys. Before you can create a user, you should be in sys. So you have to be in sys before you can create a user. If you want to drop a user, you have to be in sys. If you want to shut down the database, you have to be in sys. The sys is the administrator. It is having what? The upper hand of the database. So you cannot drop the sys, because the sys is the administrator. It does everything for the database. So show user is sys. We are in sys. So we are going to create a user. Now our user is new HR. If you want to create a common user, all common users begin with C, a double hash, and then the name itself. So if you look at this example, it says create a user with the name new HR. So over here I have here create user C double hash new HR identified by 1, 2, 3. So create is a DDL command. We know create means what? Establishing something new. So create user. We brought or introduced the user here because the object we are creating is a user. So if I was creating a table, then I have to type what? Create table. If it was a view, then it has to be create view. If it was a sequence, then it has to be create sequence. But I'm creating a user, so create user. Then the name of the user. So this is the name of the user, C double hash new HR identified by 1, 2, 3. Every user must have a password. Every user must have a password, because Oracle is a requirement whenever you are making connections. So you need to assign a password for the user. So that is why we have identified by 1, 2, 3. So you cannot ignore identified by. This clause or keyword is very necessary because we use it in assigning a password to a user. So create user C double hash new HR identified by 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to execute this command here. So create user C double hash new HR. I'll hit on enter. Now look at something. You realize that it didn't execute. Why? Because there is no semicolon at the end of the new HR. Once you bring a semicolon, that means you've ended the command. It's just like English. When you bring a full stop, that means that is the end of the sentence, but there is no semicolon. So we are continuing with the command. So create user C double hash new HR. Then I'll bring the command identify by 1, 2, 3. I'll bring my semicolon. I'll hit on enter. Now it will tell me user created, but we want to see if the user is there. So how do we check if you've successfully created a user and then the user has been established in the database? So we use the command select username. I'll hit on enter from DBA underscore users, that is the view. I'll hit on enter again to come to the next line where username is equal to C double hash new HR. Then I'll end with my semicolon. Take note that in Oracle database, when you are making a search, Oracle is case sensitive when you are making a search. So if even if you created the user in lowercase, So let's say the new HR, I created it using lowercase. When you are making the search, it should be in uppercase. It's mostly should be in uppercase, unless you apply a function to make the changes. So I'll hit on enter. Now it will tell me I have a user called new HR in the database. So this is how we create a common user. Later on, we will look at how to create a local user, how to create our tables, how to insert records, how to work with Oracle functions, and then we'll move on to another important thing in Oracle database that we call PL/SQL. That is the programming aspect in Oracle database. Thank you. Like my videos and then subscribe to my channel.